All right, we're back in another Sound the Battle Cry, and the name of the message today is The Catholic Influence on Aleister Crowley. Now, you might be wondering, why are we even doing a message on this? Well, I'll explain it to you. Okay? So, really, to get caught up on this, you need to go back, watch my message, The Mistress of Witchcrafts. And what that's about is Rome's occult knowledge and power. The knowledge of the occult in the Catholic Church, which is Mystery Babylon. That's what we're talking about. There's lots of talk today about the Zionists, and they're not innocent. They are not innocent at all. They are to blame for a lot of bad, evil things. So by no means would I ever defend them, because I don't. But there is more to this, and there's a lot of misdirection. And there's a lot of times there are people that omit certain facts about different events in history or certain people, and they omit Catholic connections to certain people, Catholic connections to certain places and events that are very, very significant to history. And they omit the Catholic connections to what's going on with positions of power, the influence on positions of power today as well. And so that all ties together with this, which is Aleister Crowley, who is the most infamous Satanist in modern times. And we're going to see today that there are multiple Catholic connections to him, Catholic influence on his beliefs, more than one Catholic influence on his beliefs. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone put all this together in one place. Okay, so it's absolutely necessary to do this, to reprove the unfruitful works of darkness. And specifically, what are we looking at here? Revelation 18:23, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. The sorceries of who? The mistress of witchcrafts, Rome. Here's another one, Revelation 17:5, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And that mother of harlots is Rome. It's absolutely Rome. They're the only one that fits out of anyone. And I will show you more evidence for that today. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So, let's get into it. So, what we're going to look at first is I'm actually going to play a clip for you from an older message that I did, which is going to show the Catholic origin of Aleister Crowley's Abbey of Thelema and do what thou wilt. So do what thou wilt's like his most famous saying about his philosophy, coming from the book of the law. And then also the Abbey of Thelema was the name given to a place that he was staying at in Sicily for a while, doing rituals there and all these other types of things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this clip for you to get you brought up to speed on that. And then I'm going to jump into a bunch of brand new information that's never been put out on this channel. And a lot of other places hasn't been put together. So let's roll the clip and then we'll get back to it. A person may do what he considers allowable, says Emmanuel Sá. Who's that? Manuel de Sá was a Portuguese Jesuit priest, theologian, and exegete. He distinguished himself as a student at University of Coimbra, and at the age of 15 joined the Jesuits, and soon afterward taught philosophy, first at Coimbra, next at Gandia, where he also acted as tutor to Francis Borgia, who was at the time Duke of Gandia, who was considering joining the Jesuit order. And then he became the third superior general Black Pope, and now Francis Borgia is also venerated as a saint. He's been made a saint. So Manuel de Sá tutored Francis Borgia, the third Black Pope. So when he says this quote, that's an authority. That is a very well-respected authority. A person may do what he considers allowable, says Emmanuel Sá of the Society of Jesus, according to a probable opinion, although the contrary may be more probable one. The opinion of a single grave doctor is all that is requisite. That's all you need. That's all that they need. If one guy said it, one Jesuit said, hey, it's okay, hey, then it's okay. A person may do what he considers allowable. It kind of sounds like he may do whatever he wants. Now, that kind of sounds like to me like something else I've heard. Oh wait, there was a saying that someone had called, do what thou wilt. Do what thou wilt. Who was that? Aleister Crowley. Doesn't this statement sound like the Satanist Aleister Crowley's motto of do what thou wilt? Well, believe it or not, Crowley actually took that statement from a Catholic Franciscan friar, as well as the name for his commune in Sicily. I don't know if you knew that. This might be news to you, but Crowley took both of those things from a Catholic. Let's look. The Abbey of Thelema, and Thelema, by the way, is a Greek word for will, and is the religion that was started by him. People that follow his teachings are called Thelemites. The Abbey of Thelema is a small house which was used as a temple and spiritual center founded by Aleister Crowley and Leah Herzig of Cefalù in Sicily in 1920. Okay, if you don't know who Aleister Crowley was, they called him the most wickedest man in the earth, the great beast 666, the most infamous Satanist of the 20th century, right? He influenced a lot of people. I have a video about him, about his influence on music. It's called The Power of Music. And he influenced, people like Ozzy Osbourne and The Doors and David Bowie and Iron Maiden and all this stuff, right? So a hugely influential Satanist. And he had this commune called the Abbey of Thelema in Sicily. Well, in the 16th century, Francois Rabelais used Theleme, the French form of the word Thelema, as the name of a fictional abbey in his famous books Gargantua and Pantagruel, which was a fictional story he wrote about some giants. And in the book was this place. I'll show you. The name was borrowed from the Franciscan friar Francois Rabelais' satire Gargantua and Pantagruel, where an Abbey de Theleme, literally Abbey of Thelema. Aleister Crowley took the name for his place in Sicily from this Franciscan friar's story. It was called Abbey of Thelema in the story. And the Abbey of Thelema in that story is described as a sort of anti-monastery where the lives of the inhabitants were spent not in laws, statutes, or rules, but according to their own free will and pleasure. What does that sound like? The idealistic utopia was to be the model of Crowley's commune, while also being a type of magical school, giving it the designation Collegium ad Spiritum Sanctum, a college towards the Holy Spirit. Talk about blasphemy. It is in the first book where Rabelais writes of the Abbey of Thelema, built by the giant Gargantua. The abbey was built by a giant. It pokes fun at the monastic institutions, since his abbey has a swimming pool, maid service, and no clocks in sight. But below the humor was a very real concept of utopia and an ideal society. Rabelais gives us a description of how the Thelemites of the abbey lived and the rules they lived by. So here's a quote from the story. All their life was spent not in laws, statutes, or rules, but according to their own free will and pleasure. They rose out of their beds when they thought good. They did eat, drink, labor, sleep when they had a mind to it, and were disposed for it. None did awake them. None did offer to constrain them to eat, drink, nor do any other thing. For so had Gargantua established it. In all their rule and strictest tie of their order, there was but this one clause to be observed. Do what thou wilt. Do what you will. And that's where Aleister Crowley got it from. A 16th century Catholic Franciscan friar. He did not originate it. In the mid-18th century, still before Aleister Crowley was even around, Sir Francis Dashwood inscribed the adage on a doorway of his abbey and Medmenham, where it served as the motto of the Hellfire Club. You heard of that? Hellfire Club? Yeah, Benjamin Franklin was a member of it. Well, Rabelais' Abbey of Thelema has been referred to by later writers Sir Walter Besant, the husband of Annie Besant from the Theosophists, and James Rice in their novel The Monks of Thelema, 1878. Okay? But in the mid-18th century, in the 1700s, Sir Francis Dashwood had the motto of "Do what thou wilt" at the Hellfire Club before Aleister Crowley ever said it. Okay, so it came around before. But before that, it came from the Franciscan friar, Catholic. Okay, so that's a little fact there for you. Of the far-reaching influence of the Catholic Church. But anyways, so a person may do what he considers allowable. It's the same thing as "do what thou wilt." The Jesuits' motto basically is "do what thou wilt." And they came up with the casuistry and probabilism and all this stuff in order to justify "do what thou wilt." That's all it is. Okay, so now that you know the Catholic origin of Abbey of Thelema and "do what thou wilt," and how "do what thou wilt" sounds very similar to what the Jesuits were teaching, we're going to move on to the next point, which is Karl von Eckarthausen. And we're going to start here with this quote. What really seems to have started him down the twisting trail of occultism, we're talking about Crowley here, was the Book of Black Magic and of Pacts by self-proclaimed expert Arthur Edward Waite. So taken was Crowley by this work, with its suggestions of mystic brotherhoods and ancient traditions, that he wrote to Waite seeking further guidance. Waite responded by suggesting that he take a look at The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary, an obscure tome by an equally obscure 18th century German mystic Karl von Eckarthausen. Eckarthausen had studied at the Jesuit University of Ingolstadt. Ingolstadt University. In which university is this? Yes, it's the same one. He studied under Adam Weishaupt, later the infamous founder of one of the most notorious secret societies, the Bavarian Illuminati. Let me stop right there and talk about that for a second. So first of all, Karl von Eckarthausen was Jesuit trained under Adam Weishaupt, also a Jesuit professor of canon law at Ingolstadt. And before we move on to talk more about Eckarthausen, just a little fact. I'm going to throw in a lot of different facts here about these types of things. But concerning the Bavarian Illuminati. Okay, so Bavarian Illuminati, a lot of people have heard about that, right? Founded in 1776, and everybody talks about the Illuminati. That's who they refer to. Well, what you need to understand is, before the Bavarian Illuminati was founded, the order of the Jesuits was suppressed a few years earlier. And it was kind of strange that a few years later, after the Jesuits were suppressed, that this order of the Illuminati was founded by a Jesuit, and they started doing all these subversive activities, which were very similar to the activities of the Jesuits. Now, you might say, well, it was a different type of philosophy, more enlightenment and all this stuff. But they were doing the same type of activities. Infiltration, subversion. They wanted to foment revolutions in different countries. That's what the Jesuits have been doing for many years. Jesuits have been kicked out of over 80 countries for doing that type of stuff. They are masters at it. They've been around long before the Bavarian Illuminati. The Jesuits were founded in the 1500s. Okay? So they had plenty of experience doing these types of things before the Bavarian Illuminati was founded. And what it looks like is just another name that they used so they could continue operating while they were suppressed until they were restored later. But anyways, that's a side note. Let's continue. What, if anything, Crowley made of that connection is uncertain, but he did latch on to Eckarthausen's allegorical work as further evidence of a secret church and a hidden community of saints guided by mysterious illuminated adepts. This is from the book Secret Agent 666, Richard B. Spence, page 21 to 22. I'll be referring to that book a few times in this message. But, okay, so Eckharthausen is the one who wrote The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary, and Arthur Waite is the one that suggested that Crowley read this book, Cloud Upon the Sanctuary. And this was a book written by a Jesuit-trained Catholic guy who was into all manner of occult beliefs. Now, that's not all. We have some more information about this. And I want you to also see exactly what we're going to look at here is also the specific thing, main point that Eckharthausen was teaching, because that's going to explain some other things as well. The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary and the Invisible Church. The theosophy of the Mason and Rosicrucian Ivan Lopuchin was inspired by the thought of Johann Arndt Bohm, Eckharthausen, and St. Martin. Lopuchin, in his turn, also influenced Eckharthausen, who read this most well-known work by the Russian theosopher in French translation, and afterwards also corresponded with him about Eckharthausen. About it. Eckharthausen had also meant to translate the work into German. The first Russian edition appeared in 1798. Eckharthausen's inner church. Okay, check this out. You gotta pay attention to this. Eckharthausen's inner church referred to the divine in man and also to the Christian theosophy that is manifest in the world, especially outside the churches. Lopuchin saw the inner church as a means also to give place to his Masonic insights within the outer church. Now listen to this. Both Lopuchin and Eckharthausen remained members of the established churches, respectively the Russian Orthodox and the Catholic Church, which in the Catholic is talking about Eckharthausen, remained Catholic. For Franz von Baader, the inner and outer churches were inextricably bound up with each other. Okay, and this was a comment on the book by Ivan Lopuchin, Some Characteristics of the Interior Church. Okay, so what's being talked about here is this. You have to understand this concept: inner church, outer church. Okay, and really what this is talking about is in all the religions around the world and churches, there's an exoteric outer church, right? Where they have certain doctrines, catechisms that they write down, where they say, hey, this is what we believe. And that's what they teach to the masses of people, the average person that goes to those churches or those religions. But there are different teachings, esoteric teachings, that are taught by, you could say, the inner church, and they're more mystical teachings, occult teachings. And a lot of times you have to pass certain, tests to be able to obtain that knowledge, maybe initiations. You have to advance in ranks of priesthoods, these types of things. But then you start to see, wait a second, as you go up and you learn more, that the beliefs of the inner church are different than the beliefs of the outer exoteric church. Okay, and that concept is really important to understand when it comes to understanding the Catholic Church, because they are the keepers of the mysteries. Okay, Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots, they have retained all the secrets of Babylon, Egypt, these mystery schools. They took all that knowledge and they're retaining it. They have a massive secret library in the Vatican Library. They had missionaries going all around the world, Jesuits, Knights Templar, and obtaining esoteric secrets from native tribes, practicing cultural spiritism and all these different types of things. And they put it all together. And that's why, one more point, that's why, if you go watch the Mistress of Witchcraft teaching, I quote in there H.P. Blavatsky, founder of Theosophy, who said that the Jesuits are the most powerful black magicians in the world. That's what she said. Not a Christian, not a fundamentalist, a Theosophist, Blavatsky. She's the one that said that. She said they owe their power to black magic in its worst form. But how did they get that knowledge and that power? Because of going all around the world and taking a piece from here and there and everywhere and infiltrating. That's what they do. You go look through the Jesuit series that I have. You go to my Rome playlist. I have multiple different messages on the Jesuits, but they have the tactic whereby they transform as chameleons into anyone, including in different religions. They'll infiltrate, pretend to be someone from that religion. They even attend seminaries of other denominations in order to learn everything that they teach and then go out there and pretend to be them, but then slowly pushing that denomination or that group, pushing it towards the aims of Rome. That's what they've always done. But anyways, we're talking about the inner church and outer church here. Let's continue. Okay, so that's it for Eckhart Tolle. But, what Crowley said was that he said he wanted to do whatever it took to become a part of this, inner church that Eckhart Tolle talked about. Okay? All right, so we're going to read a little bit more about what Eckhart Tolle was teaching with this book, Cloud Upon the Sanctuary and the Inner Church. And then I'm going to show you a quote from Aleister Crowley where he's, recommending this book. And you're going to get some more insight when it comes to that. Eckhart Tolle is best known for writing a book about the true secret brotherhood that exists beyond the individual secret societies and stands above them all in rank. The true Illuminati, the enlightened ones who are united above the morals and dogma that men are divided over, working entirely in secret towards ends that will not be fulfilled in their earthly lives. He claims that the various occult orders of his time are simply branches of this inner order, writing, "The way that the innumerable rays of light surround the center of a circle, so it is with the mysteries that surround a single truth. In the esoteric tradition, there is a persisting idea that the leaders of the various known secret societies are united by membership in a brotherhood that is never named. They have been called the secret chiefs, the unknown superiors, and the round table in various traditions. Eckhart Tolle calls them the hidden church, and he elucidates their work vividly in his magnum opus, The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary." That's what he's talking about, this hidden church, the secret chiefs, these types of things. Now, check this out. So this quote is important because it helps you to understand Freemasonry in the proper perspective. When discussing hidden wisdom that this order guards, Eckhart Tolle uses explicitly Masonic language, triple word, workman, cornerstone, alluding to the notion that Freemasonry is merely an outer shell of this hidden church. Look at this quote. "We assure you that our treasures, though of infinite value, are concealed in the so simple a manner that they entirely baffle the researches of opinionated science. And also, though these treasures would bring to carnal minds both madness and sorry, nevertheless, they are and they remain to us the treasures of the highest wisdom. My best blessing upon you, O my brothers, if you understand these great truths. The recovery of the triple word and its power will be your reward. Your happiness will be in having the strength to help reunite man with man, man's nature with God, which is the real work of every workman who has not rejected the cornerstone." Okay, so when he talks about this, alluding to the fact that Freemasonry is merely an outer shell of this hidden church, that's very important to understand. Okay, some people just, they put the blame in the wrong place. Oh, it's all the Freemasons. They're doing all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, there are powerful people all throughout history who have been Freemasons that have done these different types of things, but that's just one layer of it. That's just one layer of the onion. That's still an outer shell. And if you go up the pyramid, you see that there's more going on, and there's more even behind the Freemasonry. Even when you get to the top ranks, there's more behind that, and that's what it's talking about, this hidden church that's even above Freemasonry. Okay? Yeah, so check this point out before we get to the quote by Crowley on this. The title of the book refers to the clouds that block one from perceiving the sanctuary and becoming receptive of God even in this world. This cloud is lifted by the awakening of the organ of inward sense. Okay, so I'm going to read this quote, but then I'm going to make some comments on this. It is possible by seeking inwardly to approach the essential wisdom, and this wisdom is Jesus Christ. Okay, the Jesus Christ he's referring to is not the Jesus Christ of the Bible, I'll tell you that much. But let's continue. Who is also the essence of love within us. The truth of this statement can be experimentally proved by anyone. The condition of the experience being the awakening within us of a spiritual faculty, cognizing spiritual objects as objectively and naturally as the outward senses perceive natural phenomena. The awakening of the organ is the lifting of the cloud from the sanctuary. That's what he's talking about, the title of the book. Enabling our hearts to become receptive of God even in this world. The knowledge of these mysteries has been always preserved by an advanced school, illuminated inwardly by the Savior, and continued from the beginning of things to the present time. This community is the invisible celestial church founded immediately after the fall. And then listen to this right after that. Immediately after the fall implies that it was initiated by the serpent who tempted man and woman to eat of the forbidden fruit, making them as gods. Wow. Yeah, exactly. Founded by Satan. He is the founder. Okay, so it says the invisible celestial church founded immediately after the fall. And then they're saying, this sounds like it's referring to that it was founded by the serpent, by Satan. Okay, because he is always seen, they teach this in Theosophy. Blavatsky said over and over again, the serpent is the savior. Lucifer is good. He's the one that gave man knowledge, enlightenment, these types of things. He is the light bearer. Albert Pike said, Lucifer, is it he who bears the light? Yes. Manly P. Hall, the Freemason, he said that you could obtain the seething energies of Lucifer. They're all referring to the same thing. Now, another thing Manly P. Hall said that ties together with this, 33rd degree Freemason, Masonic historian. He wrote The Secret Teachings of All Ages, very influential occult book. When it talks about this, that the awakening of the organ is the lifting of the cloud from the sanctuary, what do you think that's talking about? Well, it's talking about opening the third eye. That's what they're always referring to. This is one of the main goals of all these mystery schools, and Manly P. Hall says it. And he talks about it. If you go listen to the message I did, Mistress of Witchcrafts, I quote from Manly Hall, where he talks all about that this is like one of the main goals is awakening the third eye through the pineal gland. And there it is. And that pineal gland is represented by a pine cone, and there's a big old pine cone right in front of the Vatican. So that's a little bit more about what this, what that means, cloud upon the sanctuary. All right, now we're going to get to the quote by Aleister Crowley, and then we'll move on to the next subject. This small book has had a profound influence on Western esotericism. The concept of the hidden church was incorporated into other influential Masonic orders, such as the Asiatic Brethren, about whom A.E. Waite writes, "The order comes therefore before us as that of a hidden church or holy assembly, ex hypothesi like that of Eckhart Tausen, but passing into substituted manifestation by virtue of its ceremonial workings." So this concept was very influential of the hidden church. Now, the most famous and infamous figure to praise this book and work into his own teachings was none other than Aleister Crowley, who claimed that this book inspired his occult career. This book inspired his occult career, writing that it was this book which first made me aware. Actually, let me go down to the quote from the snippet, because there's a screenshot of it. This is from Crowley's writings. "The cloud upon the sanctuary by Eckhart Townsend. We shall be very sorry if any of our readers misses this little book, a translation from the French translation of the German original into the pretty broken English of Madame de Steiger. It was this book which first made your reviewer aware of the existence of a secret mystical assembly of saints and determined him to devote his whole life without keeping back the least imaginable thing to the purpose of making himself worthy to enter that circle. We shall be disappointed if the book has any less effect on any other reader. And that's Aleister Crowley's review of The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary from his publication, The Equinox. That's what he said. So this book was so influential on him, the book written by this Jesuit-trained Eckhart Townsend, that he said he was going to dedicate his whole life to make himself worthy to enter that circle of that inner church. Wow. Pretty significant statement. All right, so that covers Eckhart Townsend, Cloud Upon the Sanctuary, and it's very big influence on Aleister Crowley by Jesuit-trained Catholic mystic. Now we're going to move on to the next point, which is Cardinal Rampolla. Outwardly, the OTO, which is the Ordo Templi Orientis, which Crowley was a part of, helped to organize the beginning of the whole thing and form their manifesto. Outwardly, the OTO seems to have remained rather small and exclusive, though Rus tirelessly recruited out of both spiritual zeal and vanity, but also to use the order as a cover for German intelligence. It seems that Crowley first came to Rus's serious attention as a result of the Rosicrucian scandal. In spite of the beast's flagrant violation of sacred oaths, Rus recruited him. In 1912, in a Berlin ceremony, Rus made Crowley the chief of the OTO branch in the British Isles, the Ordo Mysteria Mystica Maxima, or Triple M, a mandate letter extended to the English-speaking America. Thus, he earned yet another magical name, Baphomet, after the mysterious idol allegedly worshipped by the Knights Templar. More Catholic stuff. Immediately after his initiation, Crowley drafted a manifesto for the Triple M, later adopted by the OTO as a whole. Okay, so the manifesto that Crowley made, that we're going to be talking about here, was adopted by the OTO. Okay, so keep that in mind when we read this. In it, he listed some 20 organizations whose collective wisdom supposedly informed the new order. Among them, the Illuminati, the Knights Templar, Knights of Malta, Catholic orders, which are still around to this day. The Knights of Malta are very influential today. There are people in positions of power, more than you would think. Many people who are also Knights of Malta. And you should look into that. The Gnostic Catholic Church, and even in the original edition, the Golden Dawn. He also offered an impressive, if improbable, list of mythical and historic members of the OTO's constituent originating assemblies. And let's look at that. Among the more recent and intriguing names, Crowley added Cardinal Rampolla, the former papal Secretary of State, who some years earlier had given his blessings to Ashburnham's Jacobites. Count Mariano, Cardinal Rampolla del Tindaro, had almost been elected Pope in 1903, only to see his candidacy undone by the fierce opposition of Habsburg Emperor Franz Joseph. We'll talk about that in a second, but think about this. The OTO, Crowley wrote this manifesto for the OTO, and he said, here's who influenced us. Gave all these groups, Knights Templar, Knights of Malta, but then he says, here's some more recent people who have influenced us. And he names Cardinal Rampolla, a cardinal in the Catholic Church, who almost became the Pope. That's how, this wasn't just some random low-ranking priest, right? This was a cardinal who just barely missed becoming the Pope. And we're going to read a little bit more about that now. According to one version, by the revelation that Cardinal was a secret Freemason. Page 4142, Secret Agent 666, Richard B. Spence. So, and again, think about what we talked about earlier, about that Freemasonry being, an outer shell, and there's all this type of overlap. You go up the pyramid, and all of a sudden, there's overlap between all these different societies and religions and different types of things that all look like they're separate in the open, right? In the exoteric lower levels, they look like they're all separate. But the higher up you go in the pyramid, the more they start to overlap. In the very top, you can find the Jesuits, the Vatican, over and over and over again, having their dirty hands in these organizations. Let's talk a little bit more about Cardinal Rampolla. See how significant he was. When Leo the 13th died in 1903, it was widely expected that Rampolla would be elected Pope. His candidacy gained momentum until the last moment when the Austrian Emperor Francis Joseph I imposed the veto jus exclusivi during the conclave. So I'm just going to give you a quick explanation as to what that means. Jus exclusivi, which means it's the Latin for right of exclusion, sometimes called the papal veto, was the right claimed by several Catholic monarchs of Europe to veto a candidate for the papacy. Although never formally recognized by the Catholic Church, the monarchs of France, Spain, and Austria claimed this right at various times, making known to a papal conclave through a crowned cardinal that the monarch deemed a particular candidate for the papacy objectionable. And so, what happened was Cardinal Jan Puznia de Kosielko, Archbishop of Krakow, expressed the veto on behalf of the Austrian Emperor. Rampolla was reported to have received enough votes to win. So I'm just showing you how close he was to becoming the Pope. He had enough votes to win, and it was only because this Austrian Emperor made an objection that Rampolla didn't become Pope. And so this guy that just about became Pope, Aleister Crowley said, yeah, that guy influenced the OTO. He influences us. A Catholic cardinal almost became Pope. Just unreal. And then there's another resource I gave here. It's an article written by a Catholic guy. Did a Freemason almost become Pope? The story of Cardinal Rampolla by Greg Heimbichner. Now, I'm just going to have a little comment on that before we move on to the next point. How do Catholics explain this stuff a lot of the times? Well, like for instance, this article, some others similar to it, they basically see it as, okay, let me just speak in general terms. A lot of times when they hear about these things, they talk about the Catholic Church being infiltrated by Illuminati, by Freemasons, all this stuff. And this is the stuff this was the propaganda that was put out in the Da Vinci Code, the Angels and Demons book written by Dan Brown. Okay? Those are some of the most read books all over the world. Right? They turned them into movies. But in the book Angels and Demons by Dan Brown, he makes it so that the Illuminati are the sworn enemies of the Vatican. And at the end of the book, the Pope saves the day by, going up in a helicopter and throwing out this container of antimatter and all this stuff. But they make it seem like, the Illuminati's just sworn enemies of the Catholic Church and all this stuff. And it's a bunch of garbage. The Bavarian Illuminati was founded by a Jesuit. Jesuits. Okay? It's a propaganda to make you think they're fighting each other. They're not. They're not. The Vatican's in control. Not only of the churches, but the secret societies. Yes, the esoteric orders. Because if you go up high enough, They find out, oh, wait a second, they have all the occult, they have the deepest, darkest occult knowledge that there is. Let me give you another little tidbit here. I'm going a little bit deeper today, but we might as well. It is a fact that very powerful people who are into very evil, satanic things are obsessed with bloodlines and keeping their power within their families and specific powerful bloodline families. Now, a lot of people know these names like Rothschilds and these types of things, but it's usually the same names that are talked about over and over and over again. But did you know, you can look this up, did you know that a Rothschild married someone from the Aldobrandini family? Now, you might say, what's the significance of that? Well, first of all, no powerful bloodline like that, a Rothschild, would ever marry outside of a powerful bloodline. Never. They would have to be very, very powerful and significant for them to want to do that. Now, it just so happens that Aldobrandini is a powerful papal bloodline of which many popes have come from in the past. Some other examples of these papal bloodlines were Orsini, Farnese, Medici, Borgia. Many of these papal bloodlines have produced popes. And you don't hear a lot of people talk about those. But it's there. And the evidence is right there that they married into that bloodline. And so, again, a lot of this stuff is just not focused on. But you need to see that they make it seem like in the open they're opposing each other, but it's not. And then what's also interesting is in this article that this guy writes, Kremheim-Bichner, he goes on to say that this guy Rampolla was almost like the Antichrist sitting in St. Peter's chair. That's what he says. So they like basically admit it. And it's and that's what it's no different than something that I would say. That the Antichrist is going to sit on the Catholic Church's St. Peter's chair, that they would call it. Yeah, it's a dynasty of them. They just look at it as, oh, the church got taken over by evil and infiltrated and all this stuff. No, it was rotten from the beginning. Go look at the past popes. Go look at the disgusting behavior of the Borgias and all these people in the past. They've always been wicked from the beginning. And they took everything from, again, Babylon, mystery religion, these types of things. It's always been that way. They're not infiltrated. That's the biggest lie, to say they're infiltrated. But that's what they want to have you believe. Especially today, they're pushing that agenda. Oh, it's being infiltrated. There's a civil war in the Catholic Church. No, that's garbage. It's a show. It's an illusion. It's theater. So then you take the side of the false light. Like that Archbishop Vigano. Oh, he's fighting the New World Order. That's a lie. That's a trap. To make you think that they're on the good side. So here we go. Next point. Henry Christopher Watts. It was through Plummer that Crowley met Henry Christopher Watts. The Welsh-born Watts was secretary of another esoteric religious order, the Society of Atonement. Very Catholic order. Which was based further up the Hudson in Garrison, New York. The avowed goal of the society was the reunion of the Anglican Church with Rome, which is the same goal of the Oxford movement. Same goal. That was identical to the aspirations of some of the Jacobites Crowley had associated with back in the 1890s. Interesting. Why is Crowley over and over again associating with these Catholics? He's associating with Jacobites who want to reunite the Anglicans with Rome. That's interesting. But we're talking about Henry Christopher Watts that Crowley met, part of the Society of the Atonement. Watts, however, had another job as agent for London's Department of Information, later the Ministry of Information. This was run by John Buchan, the same man to whom NID operative Gerald Kelly reported. British archives once contained 4 files on Watts and his activities. Like Crowley's, all have vanished. From the few traces remaining, Watts worked as a propagandist, feeding articles to Catholic papers in the U.S. as a counter to German and Fenian influence. A November 3rd, 1917 letter from Watts to the Foreign Office shows that he was familiar with Crowley and his associates. In it, so we're proving that. And in it, Watts linked John Devoy, Frank Harris, and Vierek to each other and to Crowley, and all to German propaganda. He called our man. Okay, so this is what Watts says about Crowley. Check this out. He called our man a renegade Englishman, a mystic, and Rosicrucian, who of late had taken a strange interest in becoming a Roman Catholic. What? Crowley had an interest in becoming a Roman Catholic? Why would that be? I thought he was opposed to everything about that. He said he wanted to destroy Christianity. That's true. But he saw that that may have helped in something that would help his goals in some way, shape, or form. But he had an interest in that. In pursuit of that goal, seemingly an odd one for the beast, Crowley used one of his women to approach a well-known Catholic poet at the New York Times, apparently without result. Page 130, Secret Agent 666, Richard B. Spence. Okay? So, Henry Christopher Watts says that he was a Catholic associated with Crowley, and then he also says he'd taken a strange interest in becoming a Roman Catholic. And then Crowley went to go talk to a Catholic poet at the New York Times. Very interesting. Very strange. On to the next point. George Monti. French occultist George Monti, later known as Count Israel, also appeared at Crowley's side soon after his arrival in France. Monti had been secretary to the late and venerable Josephine Sarpellidan, a leading light of French Rosicrucianism and the Gnostic Catholic Church. Pelladon knew Rus and had some dealings with the OTO, and Monti apparently wanted to pick up where his master left off. In years following, Monti formed his own order, the group Occidental Esoterics, but he also claimed to be Crowley's special French representative. Crowley's special French representative. On the other hand, Monti had a reputation as a charlatan, a liar, that people tried to say that he was lying and these types of things. But let's continue reading. It was even rumored that Monti, a serial joiner of esoteric societies, was someone's spy. French intelligence could have used him to feel out or watch Crowley. Another accusation is that Monti was an agent of the Jesuits. I'm going to show you more about that from another source after this. Another accusation is that Monti was an agent of the Jesuits. As we will see, persons connected to that order would take a special interest in the self-proclaimed great beast. Monti definitely was linked to two secretive Catholic societies. He was absolutely linked to the Catholic Church. The Solidarium Pianum, a kind of counter-subversive service, and the mysterious Hieron du Val d'Or. Solidarium Pianum theoretically ceased to exist around 1921, but Hieron lasted longer. Its chief aim was what? A reconciliation between the church and Freemasonry. Wow. We keep seeing this weird, these patterns popping up over and over again. Reconciliation between Anglicans and Catholics. Reconciliation between Freemasons and the church and all these things. This ecumenical movement that wants to bring everyone back to Rome. And then he goes on to say, perhaps more accurately, the infiltration and reorganization of Freemasonry for Rome's benefit. I don't agree with that assessment. But that's, of course, what they always like to say. This smacks a little of Crowley's dealings with Ryerson and the Detroit Masons and his strange wartime interest in Catholic conversion, which we talked about earlier. Stranger still, both Hieron and Monti connected to a later secret society, the shadowy and controversial Priory of Sion. They even had links to extreme rightist groups such as Action Française and assorted Gaelic fascists. Gallic fascist. At the very least, Monti was a trafficker in information, a useful sword for Agent Crowley to know. Page 181, Secret Agent 666. Okay. So that's a little bit about George Monti. And he definitely had a Catholic connection to those secret societies. Let's move on to the next point. From another source, we're going to read more about Monti and his connection to Aleister Crowley. So learn more about that. Plantard, that's the Priory of Sion guy. Plantard had regarded George Monti as his mentor, to whom he had been introduced in 1934 by his family doctor Camille Savoir. Plantard would have been only 14. Savoir was the Grand Executive of Gaul and reformed the Great Scottish Symbolic Lodge and was involved in the Chevalier Bienveillance de la Cité Sainte. However, it is on record that Plantard did indeed speak about this in 1942, but the problem is that Monti died in October 1936, so Plantard did not know Monti long. However, Camille Savoir died in April 51, and the files of George Monti, stolen by Gerard de Cid, may well have been left to Plantard. Priory of Sion was founded 5 years after Camille Savour's death. All right, next point. Monti died quite young at the age of 56 and is believed to have been poisoned, and this is just a few days after a bulletin in the Journal of the Grand Lodge of France denounced him as an impostor and a Jesuit spy. He was, in fact, raised by the Jesuits. There has been a campaign to discredit Monti, but what is true is that he had become secretary to Josephine Peladon, who had created a Catholic order of the Rose and Cross and the Cross after having been a Martinist. Peladon was born into a Lyon family that was devoutly Roman Catholic. He studied at Jesuit colleges at Avignon and Nîmes. So, that's another interesting point. So, George Monti was trained by the Jesuits, raised by Jesuits, and then also he became secretary to Peladon, who was also Jesuit trained, coming from a Catholic background. And the Grand Lodge of France, the Freemasonic Grand Lodge of France, said they denounced him as a Jesuit spy. One more quote about George Monti. And he was also closely associated with Gerard and Caus, better known as Papus, the founder of the Martinist movement. Indeed, Papus had dispatched Monti to Egypt in 1908 for some unspecified reason. And Monti also became involved in the OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, and through this had met Aleister Crowley, the self-styled B666. Indeed, Monti was described by one person as Crowley's French representative, who himself had spent an awful lot of time in the French Pyrenees in 1908. Crowley had spent a lot of time in that part of France. Okay, so Monti, the Jesuit-trained guy, became involved with the OTO, and through that met Aleister Crowley. Again, another Jesuit Catholic connection to Crowley. Monti called himself Count Israel and formed a group called Western Esoteric Study Group, and you will remember that Papus had also founded a group called the Independent Esoteric Study Group. These groups, and according to some also the Priory of Sion, was linked to an ultra-right group, Hieron d'Avor. We saw that. Jean-Luc Chaumel states in his book Le Trésor du Triangle d'Or that Hieron practiced a version of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and that the upper degrees of this order constituted the lower degrees of Priory of Sion. Hieron was vehemently pro-monarchist, sought the reestablishment of the Holy Roman Empire. This new empire would have a reflection of heaven on earth that was specifically a Hermetic Arcadian ideal. Check this out, this quote. Chaumel describes the Hieron du Val d'Or ideals as, listen to this, a theocracy wherein nations would be no more than provinces, their leaders nothing but proconsuls, in the service of a world occult government ruled by an elite For Europe, this regime of the Great King implied a double hegemony of the papacy and the empire of the Vatican and of the Habsburgs, who would have been the Vatican's right arm. Wow. So, that's the ideals of Hiron du Valdor. And, so all types of overlapping connections there. But again, we see the Vatican popping up over and over again. And there's these weird overlaps between the Catholics, Jesuits, and these weird Catholic orders that somehow end up overlapping. And these guys that are Catholics, that are from these Catholic orders, end up joining these other occult orders like OTO and other secret societies. And they start, they have certain beliefs. And also, Jesuits are taught something, it's called the doctrine of mental reservation, where they can say one thing to you with their words, but in their mind, they could be thinking something completely different, the opposite of it. And that's their real belief, and that's how they justify lying to you. As long as they hold the truth in their head, then it's fine to say whatever false beliefs to you is actually a Jesuit doctrine. Actually, one more quote about Monti here, George Monti. Together with a man, and by the way, that was from, this is archived in this website. I got all the sources linked under here. Together with a man calling himself Gaston de Mengel, Monti, using the name Marcus Vela, formed a group calling itself Group Occidental Esoterics, a very small, supposedly esoteric order. This organization was highly secretive, pretending to be an elite body dedicated to bringing the world a lasting peace, and having a male and female branch, the Isis Lodge. The extent of its membership and activities is unknown. Check this out. Its only known document claimed as one of its goals the reconciliation of esoteric orders with the Catholic Church. See this pattern here? Because that's what they want to do. Listen, let me just say this. For many years, esoteric orders have kept things secret. But do you know what's changing now? Two things. Number one, it's hard for them to keep things secret because of the internet. And basically every occult book that's ever been written is just freely available online. And we can just go read it. So there's not many secrets. It's harder to keep the secrets. Number two, there has been a gradual slide towards embracing the occult knowledge and practices all throughout the world. And there has been an attack and a shrinking back of biblical principles, biblical morality around the world. And so they don't have to hide anymore. They really don't. They really don't have to hide much with their beliefs, their esoteric orders, initiations, secrets, all these things. So they're just going to bring it out more and more into the open because no one cares anymore. And they're going to keep bringing it out, and people are going to accept it everywhere, including the Catholic Church. That's why I say go watch the message, Mistress or Witchcrafts, because at the end of it, I say there's a coming transformation of the Catholic Church, which Pope Francis has been helping to, transition. But it's other previous popes too, JP too. Pope John Paul II, look at what he did. Look at Vatican II. Look at how they had all those, different religions on stage with the Pope, embracing them. That's what they're moving towards. And they're going to say, hey, we all have the same core essence in all our religions, so we should come together and we can reconcile the esoteric orders with the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church will say, yeah, we got all these occult, principles. We know all about that. We've known that the whole time. Oh, let's open up the Vatican Library. What do we got in here? Oh, all this esoteric knowledge. Let's bring it out. Oh, what's the true meaning of all these symbols everywhere? Well, here, let me show you. No more hiding. No more exoteric. It'll fade away. And they won't go after any esoteric order. Won't need to oppose any of it. But that's what they said they were trying to do, this order. This goal, as well as the pretensions of exclusivity, elitism, and alleged interest in world peace, is echoed in the Prior of Sion. In October 1936, the Bulletin de... it's a bunch of French stuff, from the Grand Lodge of France, the organ of the Masonic Grand Lodge, published a piece denouncing Monti as a trafficker in information and a supposed Jesuit agent. So that's just another source for that from alpheus.org. There's an article on there. Okay, just wanted to, to have multiple sources talking about this stuff. So, George Monti, supposed Jesuit agent, but definitely was Jesuit trained. Linking up with Crowley, OTO. What did they talk about? How did he influence him? We don't know, but we keep seeing this pop up over and over again with Aleister Crowley. Very interesting. Now we move on to Joseph Ledet. Clues to the strange relationship between Crowley and Knight may be hidden in the same Italian dossier that notes the beast's Sicilian expulsion. At the least, its contents offer a glimpse into some of the beast's more enigmatic connections in the 1930s. These are letters from a mysterious Briton, identified only as M, to a Jesuit priest in Rome, so-called Father Joseph Ledet. Okay? So we're talking about letters written to a Jesuit priest. Ledet was a Jesuit priest. The French-born Ledet is an interesting character in his own right. An expert in Russian and Slavic literature and professor at the Vatican's Pontifical Instituto Orientale. Ledet associated with the Collegium Russicum, a secretive body that trained priests to undertake missions in the Orthodox East, including undercover work in Soviet Russia. Ledet had worked in the USSR incognito and was probably part of the Vatican's clandestine services. Some also associated him with George Monti, who we just talked about, the dubious occultist who had proclaimed himself Crowley's French representative in the 1920s. Okay, so think about who this guy is. Ready? Before we get to a point with Crowley. This Jesuit priest, Joseph Ledet, he was a Jesuit. He was a professor at the Vatican's Pontifical Institute. And that's exactly who he was. Let's continue. On his own initiative or on orders from the Jesuit higher-ups, Ledet compiled a detailed registry of occult and subversive groups. The priest was a diehard anti-communist and an active collaborator with Mussolini's OVRA secret police. The first of the letters, dated September 25, 1935, makes no mention of Crowley. It is a query from M to Ledet concerning a very remarkable English group called New Europe or New Britain. M linked this group to psychoanalyst Alfred Adler, whose name has come up in connection with Crowley, Germer, and the Tavistock Clinic. A month later, M finally brought Crowley into the picture. Quote, "I have been very occupied," M explained, "with the special urgent investigation into the new group calling itself 11-Hour, New Britain, New Europe, New Order. This array was allied to a group in France, L'Ordre Nouveau. Still more tentacles reached out to Vienna and Holland." And listen to this. Most provocatively and cryptically, M declared that, quote, "I am inclined to link all these groups up with OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, which makes it quite dangerous stuff to handle." He added, "I expect you have the OTO in its esoteric and exoteric name, CC," and then the author guesses, does it stand for Celtic Church? We don't know, but it stands for OTO having a different name, CC. "I expect you have the OTO in its esoteric and exoteric name fully documented." This is what M is asking the Jesuit priest Joseph Ledet. Let's continue. Then M says, then asked Ledet, "Can you tell me anything of the last 10 years, and especially the 1935 the 1935 to 1936 movements of the world famous Aleister Crowley, and his many alias names. This is urgent. M concluded, can you give me a description of him recently, or a drawing, especially of his head? Page 227 to 228, Agent 666. So, this person, M, asked the Jesuit Joseph Ledet, can you tell me anything about the activities of Aleister Crowley for the last 10 years? Why do they expect this Jesuit to have all this knowledge about Aleister Crowley for the past 10 years? Now, of course, we know he was doing some work for the government, but it's specifically written to this Jesuit priest who had compiled all this information, expecting him to have all this information on Crowley, is very suspicious, I would say. Very interesting. And let's learn more about who M was, the real identity of M. It appears that at the origin of this interest in Crowley, there was an exchange of letters between a Jesuit priest, Joseph Ledet, then a professor at the Pontifical Institute for Oriental Studies, and an anonymous English correspondent. In one document, this correspondent is indicated as M. Ledet was an expert in matters relating to the spread of communism in Europe and was on the front line of the cultural battle against communism led by the Vatican in those years. He possessed, among other things, an impressive archive in which he collected information on the subject. From the file, and from other files from the same period preserved in the Italian Central Archives, we learned that he was in contact with prominent Italian police officials, such as Guido Leto, then director of the Division of General and Reserved Affairs of Public Security, with whom he exchanged information. But who was M? From the same files, we learned, first of all, that she was a woman, because one of the documents refers to her as an informatrix, which is a woman informer, of Father Ledet. We also learned that she was deeply involved in the fight against Bolshevism and had a high regard for the Italian fascist regime. She had, in fact, even published a book about Mussolini. Finally, we learned that she was a close collaborator of the right-wing political activist John Baker White, which makes us assume that she was British, or at least residing in Great Britain. After the publication of earlier versions of the present book, other authors have tried unsuccessfully to solve this mystery and give a name to M. Richard B. Spence, who I was just quoting before, for instance, has suggested that the best candidate would be Maxwell Knight, who is also known as M among his MI5 colleagues, while Tobias Churton has proposed the name of Baker White himself, without realizing that the file of the Italian secret police includes a letter from Baker White to M, clearly indicating that they were two distinct persons. Both authors also mention the possibility that M might hide the name of conspiracy theorist Nesta Webster, who was indeed a woman and was in contact with Baker White, but never wrote a book about Mussolini. All these hypotheses are actually incorrect, because we have a much better candidate for M. There is, in fact, enough evidence to come to the conclusion that M was Gertrude M. Godden, right-wing political activist and author of a series of anti-communist books in the 1920s and 1930s. Most importantly, she was also the author of a book on Mussolini, published as early as 1923. This was certainly one of the earliest monographs on the Italian dictator to be published in English, if not the very first. She seems, however, to have been forgotten by historians, and we have, in fact, little biographical information about her. And that is from page 124, Aleister Crowley and the Temptation of Politics by Marco Passi. And who was Gertrude Godden M? Gertrude Godden was born in Surbiton, Surrey, born in a Catholic family. She took a special interest in the rise of Soviet Russia. One of her correspondents was the Jesuit Joseph Ledet. Another Catholic connection. So, very strange. This Godden woman writing to the Jesuit priest, oh, can you tell me about the activities of Crowley for the past 10 years? So I thought that was interesting. I wanted to throw that in there as well. But anyways, when we look back at all this, all these different connections, it starts to paint a very strange picture of all these Catholic Jesuit connections to Aleister Crowley, influences on him. He had their writings influencing his beliefs of Abbey of Thelema, do what thou wilt. Eckhart Townsend was extremely influential. It started his whole occult career, this Jesuit guy. Connections with these other guys. Said were influenced by this cardinal who almost became pope. And it goes on and on and on. So there's a lot here. And hey, there's probably more out there that I haven't even put in here. But we don't want to make this teaching too long. Just wanted to show you that, hey, there's more out there that some researchers, for some reason, miss. Somehow they conveniently omit this stuff. They don't point it out. They don't compile it together and say, hey, look at all this Catholic connection. What's going on here? Now, of course, a lot of this was in that book, Secret Agent 666, but he doesn't make a big deal of it. He just sprinkles it in the, throughout the book with all these other things. When we put all this together, you start to go, this is looking kind of weird. Right? And then when you know even more about Rome's occult knowledge and power, if you go watch the Mysteries of Witchcraft's teaching, or you go watch the series on the Jesuits that I've done, then you can really understand there is definitely more going on here with Crowley and Rome. And maybe you could do some research on your own and chase down some more rabbit holes and find some more Catholic connections to Aleister Crowley, because it could be out there. By all means, go ahead and do it. But I hope this shows you that Rome's tentacles go everywhere. And in places you would never imagine, because they're the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I got one more quote for you before we end this. Bible passage from Nahum, chapter 3, verse 3. The horseman lifted up both the bright sword and the glittering spear, and there is a multitude of slain, and a great number of carcasses, and there is none end of their corpses. They stumble upon the corpses, because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts, that selleth nations through her whoredoms, and families through her witchcrafts. And that harlot, the mother of harlots, that mistress of witchcrafts, is the Roman Catholic Church. That's who it is. And that's the unfruitful works of darkness that we're reproving today. To show their absolutely satanic connections to these types of things. And I hope that you see that. And hope that if you are Catholic, that you would come out of her. Repent of being a part of this false church, which is nothing but paganism, mystery religion, baptized in a thin veneer of so-called Christianity, filled with false doctrine, brings people into bondage, controls them. I'm not against you, Catholic. I want you to come out of it so that you're not deceived by it anymore, that you're not under the power of her sorceries anymore. And Jesus is able to break you free from any of that. He's able to deliver you from that. If you will repent of thinking that your works can save you, and the Roman Catholic false doctrines of work salvation, you think that that's the path to salvation. You need to reject all that. You need to straight up reject all that, see that that's false, and see that the Bible says plainly, for by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. And it also says, not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy, he saved us. You repent of that work salvation system, repent of the life of sin and rebellion against God, put your faith in Jesus Christ alone to save you. That you are saved by grace through faith in Christ. Not by because you have to go be baptized and go to Mass and confess your sins to a priest and pray to dead saints and all these things. No, you're not trusting in that. That's not what you trust in. You trust in the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. his death, burial, and resurrection. You trust him. Put your faith in him. That's what it needs to be saved. Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. That's what I say to you. Come out of her. And anyone else should not be anywhere near the mistress of witchcrafts, under her influence. Shouldn't be yoking up together with her. Anyone associated with Rome, come out. Get away from it. Get away from that harlot. And I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching and listening. Please like, share, and subscribe and comment. And also go to the description where you're going to go to the subscribe to the Telegram feed, where you're going to get PDFs of the notes, uncensored news, updates. And you can find me there if I get censored from anywhere else. Thanks for all the kind comments and prayers and gifts and everything else. God bless you and have a good day.